Everyone has at least one good story. What's yours? Background: my dad is a drama queen and has tons of stories like this one. He's Norwegian and spent his first year of college at University of Windsor. There was some initial confusion on his part when it came to enrolling in courses, so he ended up not getting into any of the ones that he needed for his major. He went to the registrar to complain about this, and was promptly told that he could blame himself, and tough shit, basically. My dad, having always been a clever jerk, decided to give CBC a call. CBC sent a reporter and a camera guide to my dad's dorm, and they proceeded to follow my dad around on campus. It was a rainy day and the story looked like this: a hopeful Norwegian boy came all the way to Canada to go to college, but didn't get to enroll in any of the courses he wanted. Here he is, sad and alone, standing alone in the rain on campus at U of Windsor. So the next morning, my dad wakes up and immediately turns on the TV to see if his story is on the local news. They had told him they weren't sure whether it would be or not. To his disappointment, his story is not featured, so he walks into the kitchen to make breakfast, TV still on in the background. As the local news finish, the national news broadcast starts. Turns out, my dad was the top story in all of Canada that day. He was immediately contacted by the dean of the university, who apologized frantically and ensured my dad that he could enroll in whatever courses he desired. I love this story because I can totally see the CBC being like, yeah, this is good shit. Perf. We're going to fuck up someone's day with this. My first day of first grade, I was waiting for the bus with my mother. The street I lived on connected to a very busy huge hill of a main road. I watched this woman zoom down this curve on a bicycle going way too fast and hit a pothole. She flipped her bike and flew over her handlebars and hit a car that was coming up the road. Traffic stopped and my mom ran to this lady. She took her shirt off and started wrapping her head with the bleeding. I stayed with this lady while my mom ran back to our house and called 911. This was the early 90s and cell phones weren't a thing. I guess life was a little more trusting back then too, because no one thought twice about a 6-year-old caring for a bleeding unconscious woman in the road. Kicker is, none of these passengers in stopped cars did anything but stand around and watch. I truly believe it was this strange and traumatic moment that made me the terribly overcautious paranoid child I was and pursue nursing as an adult. I will never ever forget that lady, and I never knew what happened to her either after the ambulance came and took her away. TL, doctor, I was late for my first day of school because I was covered in someone else's blood. Well, you got a nice career out of it, so that's good. One time my younger brother was vacuuming the house and came across a large huntsman spider. Instead of trapping it or killing it or telling literally anyone else in the house, he decided to just suck it up in the vacuum and be done with it. He left the vacuum with the bag still inside in the laundry while we went on holiday for a couple of weeks. We returned to the house infested with tiny spiders. We started killing them. They started getting bigger. Eventually we had to have the house fumigated. For added horror, feel free to Google image search Australian huntsman and keep in mind a full-sized one of those bad boys can be as big as your hand. Edit, people commenting that they're brothers because they eat bugs and aren't venomous enough to kill you. They're also giant hairy beasts that stick to your skin if they land on you and run faster than my dog. You'll need Jesus. Not gonna Google Australian huntsman spider freely like that. I am not the type who lives dangerously. TL, doctor witnessed a volcanic eruption. I grew up in a place called Taupo, New Zealand, and just out of town is a volcano called Mount Ruapehu. One particular day I was staring out the window when I noticed a thick plume of ash rising up and told the teacher that it had just erupted. But being the class clown, she thought it was just another one of my disruptions, until the quiet kid in class spoke up. She had told us to stay where we are and left the classroom to talk with the other teachers about what to do, but by the time she had come back the ash had reached us. It was 11 AM on a Tuesday morning and now it was as black as night. She then told us that if our parents usually pick us up then to wait in class, but if we lived close by then we could leave. My best friend lived just down the road and decided to grab our stuff and leave. I'll never forget the moment we opened the classroom door and stepped outside. Everything was covered in a thick coat of soot and ash, and it was just so freaking dark, which made crossing the road scary as hell. You could barely see the headlights of approaching cars until they were right in front of you. But thankfully it was the only road we had to cross on our walk home, and the rest of the way was through a gully that took us right to my backyard. The next morning I woke up and it felt a lot colder than it usually did, but I just wanted to watch the morning episode of Captain Planet for once and went running for the TV. My mother walked in and said, "I thought you'd be outside playing with the others," but I had no idea what she meant. I looked outside my window and saw that it had actually snowed at my house for the first time ever. Apparently after a volcanic eruption it causes a volcanic winter which can make it snow. I had the longest driveway that went downhill, had a slight turn and went down even further into a cul-de-sac, so all the neighborhood kids came to play at my house to slide down my driveway. I've never been that happy in my entire life. I miss that day. I was fishing with a friend in a small pond a few years ago. My friend cast out a few times and went to reel in, but he snagged something about halfway back. Though it was just a branch or some weeds, but when he pulled it up out of the water his hook was embedded in the balls of a 10-inch purple dildo, that was burned on the end for some reason. I thought that was pretty hilarious and I'll probably never forget it. TL, Dr. Dildo Fishing. I assume that while in the process of stealing it from him you murdered him. Then, upon obtaining it you took the precious purple dildo into a mountain cave where you fixated on it over the course of a couple hundred years. What has a head, but never thinks? Never showers, always stinks. Stuck in a cave getting smothered. Whilst that cave squats in another? Yeah. You can just keep that. Sauron. I was working in a restaurant, carrying a huge tray of food in each hand. A little kid tried to run between my legs, but he was too tall, so his forehead slammed right into my nuts. I wound up lying on the floor in a mess of fries, milkshakes, and groinal pain. The kid's mother saw the whole thing happen, but didn't apologize, and didn't prevent her kid from running around for the next half hour. Edit, this is the TL, Doctor version of the full story, which can be found here. Originally posted to /r/tales from retail. Timmy barnstormed another waiter. That sucks. Better order some nachos. Look, he hurt his forehead because the staff wasn't paying attention to him. I want these nachos for free. Backstory, I was 15 and had driver's ed but didn't have my license yet. We also had to take first aid/CPR classes at my high school. My mom and I were home on a Saturday while my dad was at a riverboat gambling. Mom and I got into a fight, so I was upstairs pouting like a typical teenager. I was napping when I heard her start screaming my name. It wasn't an angry scream, it was a scared scream, which freaked me out. I ran downstairs to find blood everywhere on the floor, all over the dining room, kitchen. Puddles of it. It's coming from my mom's ankle. A vein had ruptured and for a while she didn't realize blood was running out of her as she sat at the kitchen table. From having first aid, I knew I had to get a tourniquet on her ankle to stop her losing more blood. We lived 20 minutes from the nearest hospital and I didn't even think to call 911. I put her in the back seat with her leg up, wrapped tightly in towels, and drove like mad to get her there. I kept her talking, but as I was getting close to the ER, she was slurring her speech and her eyes were rolling back in her head. The ER personnel got her from the vehicle and did their thing. The doctor later told me that if I had been any later she would have died. She lost almost half of her blood. She was diagnosed as diabetic while in the hospital, which helped save her life, too. As a side note, as the ER staff were working on my mom, I had my grandmother repeatedly call my house phone. This was in the early 90s with NO cell phones, to see if she could contact my dad. I was scared he was going to walk in, see puddles of blood and bloody footprints everywhere and have a heart attack from the shock. TL, doctor, I saved my mom from bleeding out when I was 15. Thank you all for watching. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to listen to Reddit.